you. At you. Tell you what's master. Coming at you. Coming at you. Rhyme style disaster. Coming at you. At you. Tell you what's master. Coming at you.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love, alongside my co-host Wilfred Riley, the High Priestess of Conservatism, Christy Kelly, and we're joined this week by two wonderful guests, Buck Angel, Trampa, as you can see on the hat, and Lisa Selin Davis, author of Housewife and Tomboy. Lisa, Buck, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we scheduled this talk to talk about the trans and the gender madness has been going on, but you know, Trump is moving at this frenzied pace, so things are changing every day, and we'll get to some of that and how it will affect everyone. But I'd like to take a step back. You know, Buck was on before. This is Lisa's first time. She'll be back again. And originally we talked about, you know, just the trans issue, and a lot of the conversation was why people were irrational in the way they addressed this and how we got here. So, Buck, you've been pretty much, like I said earlier, on fire as of late. Just this no holds barred, just going in on these activists. And so let's talk about, I guess, as we lead up to Trump and all the stuff that's going on in the media, why it even got to that point. Why did, whether you agree with it or not, why Trump had to write an executive order just to bring back some semblance of normalcy in the country?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. But you basically just said it. Why he needed to do it was because we needed some semblance of normality back. And those people, let's just call them trans activists. I call them trans terrorists. But they were literally destroying a system that I have been in for 30 plus years and have been living perfectly fine in this awesome country. But so I do think the reason that we have to have all these executive orders is that, first off, he promised the people, he did. And I really, whether or not you voted for Trump or not, whatever your situation is, I don't really care. I'm just going to say, I think that says a lot about him right there. He promised the people and he's doing what he said he was going to do. So that's awesome. Number two, I'm going to tell you that I'm in agreement with ripping down the system, because if we have to start over now, they have totally destroyed something that was once used in order to help people who actually have a mental disorder. I have a mental disorder. And so now it's become something very dangerous. Children are being hurt. Women are being attacked. It has just, you know, it basically turned into a nightmare. So I'm in agreement with taking the system down.
Will, I didn't think we'd get there so fast, but you know, Buck, and that's, you know, that you know, that's what happens when you're speaking truth. One of the things I wanted to eventually talk about is that, so when we look at the trans activists, or you know, trans terrorists, that's not a bad term. They're irrational and they're absolutist in their arguments. So where you want to be, what the ask is to be compassionate, to understand both sides. But when people are throwing grenades and they're not being rational, it's kind of hard to do that. And I think about that. Eventually, I'm going to get into what I deal with at you know, the school board here and that kind of thing. But when Buck mentioned the mental disorder, it's shocking because our school board has been taken hostage for the last year, every single month, and no one's ever said that. Well, isn't it shocking that month after month, all we talked, the whole meeting has been consumed with gender and the trans issue, and not one person has said anything about any people having a mental illness. It's all, you know, you need to conform, you need to comply, you need to do, or you're literally killing kids. So talk about how dangerous that is, Will.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely crazy. And a lot of this gets into just what definitions are and what all this stuff means. So, I mean, trans people are people, or have traditionally been people, as a published social scientist, with the mental condition of gender dysphoria. I mean, it's something you can diagnose. It's something that there are multiple treatments for, from watchful waiting for kids to full affirmation transition. So historically, and Buck or Lisa might correct this or jump in, but I mean, there hasn't been a lot of pretense that people who ID as trans actually are, in every sense of the term, fully biologically the opposite sex. Like if you are a quote unquote trans woman, you're a male with gender dysphoria, you can't actually get pregnant, for example. That's been kind of the consensus understanding for all time. And so the idea was that if you're a normal tax-paying citizen and you're a quote unquote a decent person, although I'm not sure I am in all respects, but I mean you're generally going to be fairly pleasant, kind, polite might just be a word to people who express themselves in different ways, whether that's due to a mental condition or something else like religion. Like I might personally believe my Hindu buddy's opinion that there exist, I think it's 8 dozen multi-armed blue gods is just complete fucking nonsense. No offense, but I would not tell him that. I wouldn't make an effort to critique that faith in public. And that was generally how we interacted with the very small number of trans-identified serious individuals. If you move the idea of being transgender beyond the idea of someone having gender dysphoria that's currently being treated, it becomes completely meaningless. Because the idea of gender, at least at the margins, is basically just codified sex stereotypes. And as far as I've tried to understand this, like I've read some WPATH stuff and so on, the basic position right now, and I see Buck shaking his head. I mean, like the basic position right now would seem to be that anyone who's gender non-conforming is transgender or non-binary, which is just really it was really stupid. I'm trying to watch my profanity. Like I knew girls that played basketball against me and my buddies when I was in high school that were quite good, that were on the women's team at the school or local college, that rotated rather rapidly through male and female love objects, that were physically fit. They were not men because of this, and it's odd that we're telling kind of our tomboys this now. So that's the main portion. Like, what does it mean to be trans? You should be polite about this personally, but there's a reality that underlies it. And I guess the final line there is that gender is not sex. So if I were writing some of these bills that look at women's sport, for example, I wouldn't mention trans people at all or any of that. I would just say that everyone has to compete in the athletic division that matches their biological sex. I'd even, as a male former athlete, be comfortable with the men's division being the open division. So if you're a trans man, quote unquote, trans woman, which is a male, you're someone on steroids, any of that stuff that we're now seeing in the transhuman era. I read the transhumance the other day. Like all of you are over there with the boys. That's fine. But women's sport would just be XX sport. It's not hard to define that. And last thing, we've really been asked to play along with this sort of nonsense. Like, you're going to need genital checks to see whether high school senior males and females are the opposites. I mean, like I dated in high school. Like, no, you're not. It's incredibly simple 99.9% of the time. So that is the baseline reality. Gender is not sex. The question is what to do with people with GD, but you can't just say that everyone who doesn't conform to sexist stereotypes is the opposite sex. That's one of the craziest things we've ever done.
Lisa,
Yes.
in the obviously there was as Will talked about in the beginning, an effort to just allow people to be themselves, and because no one really had to think about it because there was a small percentage of people and they weren't trying to inundate. Buck wasn't going around stopping people on the street, I'm sure 25 years ago. Hey, let me explain to you what my section, what my gender is and what I'm transitioning to and why.
Well,
so
like we had a trans man in the private gym today, and it was just a naked woman.
Right.
And I mean, like, there really is a question of like how you deal with that. It's a bunch of dudes standing around there,
Totally.
penis out, and there's someone who's a reasonably attractive woman, naked, changing. And there's a question of like in the Me Too era, how do you react to that? Is everyone just supposed to pretend this is normal, keep discussing the game? so those are things you're gonna have to do.
Well, there's actually going to be there are a lot of questions to be asked, because even if Trump unleashes another slew of executive orders that stop some of this, there's a difference between stopping and ending. And ending is we come to some understanding of what happened and we figure out how to deal with the fallout. And the big difference between this American affirmative approach and the way it was developed in the Netherlands is that originally transition was a method of, as Will said, treating gender dysphoria. And you were evaluating young people based on whether or not they were good candidates for it. Would they would their lives be better if they did this, knowing that there's a big risk and it's harder on you, etc. Under the affirmative model, you're not even asking about gender dysphoria. You're affirming a gender identity that only the child can know, excavate, etc. And it's really a kind of child-led medicine.
Yep.
So even the idea of gender identity as we understand it now is a toddler's understanding of gender identity that's based on stereotypes, as Will and Buck were both saying. A man is somebody who looks a certain way and does certain things, and a woman the opposite. And we're all expected to participate in these fantasies about who we are. But that's really a phase that gives way around ages 7 or 8 to gender or sex constancy, when a kid figures out, oh, it's about my body, it's not about stereotypes. So I see this whole affirming endeavor as keeping people at a toddler's level of cognition. And there are a lot of tantrums, there are a lot of, if you don't give this to me, I will show up at your meeting week after week singing. Charles
Macarena.
is on my kids, school board. So these people are actually, almost none of them have kids in the school district, but they are essentially throwing tantrums.
Yeah.
And there's a much larger issue to do with social media and the way we commune now about sort of not letting children grow up. And I think these things are all connected. Right. And unfortunately, when it comes to this modern idea of trans kid and this American approach of gender affirming care, not letting kids grow up includes puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and sometimes surgery, and even psychological interventions that I think really do a number on kids, because they're told that if other people don't participate or treat them exactly the way that they want to be treated, those people are bad and evil, including their parents.
Well, can you talk just a little bit more about that, in the sense that Will gives me a hard time because I always try to give people their argument. And he's pretty much like, screw them. But let's assume that they're right. Because, I like to leave space just in case I'm wrong. So let's assume that they're right. Okay. And everybody who says that they're have this this gender, they don't call it dysphoria, but if they feel that they're, trans, they are, regardless of the age, and all that stuff is true. Let's say that might be the case. Even if that's the case, what harm it does, and what it does when you talk about, and so a lot of this argument isn't about, like Buck, it's not about what you want to do as an adult. The argument came up when, one, it became too vocal and too visible everywhere, and they were forcing it on everyone. So it had to be in every TV show, it had to be in every commercial. Everybody had to yell their pronouns. And when it went down to children, and it became, well, it'd be easier if we could just do these puberty blockers and stop them from aging, and then put a pause, what it just puts a pause on, right? So obviously people who didn't care before started to speak up, because they're like, the boy's 7, can you stop it? So even if we say, okay, maybe they want to do that down the road, what's the harm in doing it between 8 and 12? And what's the harm with just giving them drugs, or if they need therapy, because you say it's a mental illness, let's give them therapy. But the therapist is telling them, not really helping them, come to grips with what they're dealing with, just telling them, affirming, like you say, everything they believe, and almost in a way feeding it to them. So what is that doing to them?
Well, I think the whole affirmative model is, again, it's based on excavating this authentic self, that's covered in something inside you. It kind of makes each person their own God. And the therapist, when the therapist affirms the kid, instead of challenging the kid, or why do you feel that way, what do you think you get out of transitioning, all the questions that Buck was asked 30 years ago, I've been talking to Buck a lot over the past few years. I know his story well, and these are very, very serious interventions. Even, I think, even the psychological intervention, again, because it comes with this demand that everyone bow to you. And I think it's really about creating kids who are weak and dependent and can't handle adversity. And if you look at the beginning of, I've been working on this book on the youth gender culture war and the history of gender affirming care. And if you look at how these teachings in schools started, they happened because there was a very effeminate gay boy who was beaten so badly. I think he was in Wisconsin, that he was hospitalized. He lost his spleen. He almost died. They had bullied him. And when I say bullied, what I mean is they had put his head in a urinal and peed on him. I mean, he was not going to live. He ran away. He called it LGBT, I guess, probably at the time just LGBT hotline, and they got him a lawyer and they sued, and he won this big lawsuit. And it really launched this anti-bullying movement in schools. But bullying meant what I just described, and harassment meant what I just described. And now it's 30 years later, and harassment is, you called me a pronoun I don't like. And I'm psyched for kids to learn about grammar, but not this. That's not harm. It's the concept creep of the word harm.
Yeah.
And it's also understanding trans as the same as gay. So we used to say gay was a mental illness, and we stopped that. And people want to say that trans is the same thing, but Buck will tell you it's not.
Nope.
And transition is a treatment for either for gender dysphoria or for autogynephilia, that it soothes your desire to have a quote unquote woman's body. Transition works for some people, but there's actually no way to tell for whom it's going to work and for whom it will ruin their lives.
And it's not changing. It's not, you're not doing it to say that you're a man or you're a woman. You're doing it, as part of a package of what's, helping you deal with what you're dealing with. Christy?
Well, with your dysphoria, it's why you need to have a diagnosis of dysphoria and why it needs to stay in a mental disorder space. And once I will use my own story, once I got a diagnosis from an actual real therapist after years of pushing back, which is what Lisa said, pushing back on me. What does it mean to be a man? What do you think you mean a man? Why do you want? I mean, for years she did that until eventually realizing that this might help me move forward. But we're not doing that now. And my diagnosis said, oh, I have this problem. It's like when you get diagnosed with some ailment like diabetes or something, and you're like, oh shit, that's why I have been feeling so bad. I get it now, and I'm going to take my insulin, and it's going to make me feel better, on the daily basis. It's the exact same thing once you get that diagnosis, and you respect. Transsexual people respect that diagnosis. We are completely living in reality and know that we haven't changed our sex. What we change is our appearance in order for you to see us as the way we want to be, if that makes sense. We're full on living in reality. We just don't feel comfortable with our physical body looking a certain way. And it's always been like that with transsexual people. It wasn't until something happened, and I can't tell you what it is, said it, but something twisted where all of a sudden a bunch of weirdos came into this community, and I'm the guy who says it because I do, but they are not trans people. They are fetishists, and they are adult fetishists who came into this community, who overtook it, and they became very vocal, very mean, very angry, and very demanding. And then they put that on the children. So we have to hold these adult fetishist, cross-dressing, AGP people who happen to be males mostly, who created a very misogynistic movement under the guise of trans.
Christy?
So I love Buck's story because when Buck says it's a disorder, it's like, okay, yes, and it's not harsh because it's your reality. But when someone like, Vivek or someone on the right says it's a disorder,
Yeah.
I almost cringe because it just sounds too harsh, right? Even though
Yes.
it's true on both ends. So we need your
Sure.
voice and we need you to be elevated. And before I watched Cut the Bull, I had never heard of you. And there's a reason why they're not elevating you because
Yes.
it just cuts down, everything that they have to say about it. One thing you said, Charles, is what is it doing to them as far as affirming their reality? But what is it doing to the system? What is
Mm.
it doing to the schools? Because what we're seeing out here, especially in Arizona, a lot of the school boards are flipping where conservatives are taking over the school boards out here. And the first thing they're doing is they're getting rid of not just SEL, but they're getting rid of almost all therapy, right?
Mm.
Because they're swinging the opposite direction. They're like, we're not going to even give these therapists a chance to get their hands on any of the kids. Parents just take care of the therapy at home. So it's not just that it's, affirming this child's, disorder is hurting the child. It's hurting the system. And
Mm.
who's being left in the cracks is kids who, parents are don't have money or don't have time or don't have resources to take them to therapy, or they don't know to take them to therapy because they actually need assistance, or kids that are being abused and neglected. If you take all the therapists out of the school, who's going to recognize when, this kid is being abused? So I think it's not just affirming the trans child, it's hurting the entire system.
Yep. No,
You know,
that's so.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Christy, I I've changed my mind in the past few years about school in general. And I know that for some kids, school is the only place where they get a hot meal. They put in washing machines in some schools because we have so many homeless students here. And I feel for those people and I get why that's happening. But at the same time, schools are failing our students who aren't in crisis like
Yeah.
that. We're so behind academically,
Yeah.
and I don't. I keep arguing, with my own kids' school and waging this argument kind of publicly about religion has declined, church attendance has declined, and it seems like schools are functioning as churches and trying to impose particular morals and beliefs onto our kids. And I don't share those beliefs.
Right.
And I really would love it if they would teach math.
Well, there's
Yeah,
another
Right.
if I can jump in there for a bit, just I mean, myself and Charles on the board
Close my
are
door.
educators, and yeah, that's exactly right. Like the schools are failing all the people who aren't failing or who aren't quote unquote traumatized. I think is absolutely true. Like to some extent, this is just because we're such a big, diverse country. But I mean, the USA now ranks something like 26th in the world in education.
Wow.
So I mean, there's in inner city schools in Baltimore or in poor white schools in Kentucky, the proficiency rate for mathematics is 2%. And it'd be easy to put a link in the chat and show you guys that. So when you say
Wow.
the school is spending this massive amount of time on therapy for kids or providing not just, there's nothing wrong with like a school lunch, but 3 meals a day and laundry services. My suggestion for schools would be most of these services, if you're in a big city like New York or Chicago, exist. So if you see a kid that looks abused, that has a black eye, something like that, you can contact child welfare. You can contact the police. I don't think the school needs to employ 3 or 4 therapists to play that role and to engage with the kids at that level between the kids and the parents. And the reason for that is just that everything is a trade-off. So, I mean, if you have 5 kids that are violently abused out of 3,000 kids, and then you have 2,995, hate to use the term, but normal kids, every kid has to go to at least 2 therapy sessions every year. How many people are being exposed to potentially damaging modern ideas versus how many people are being helped? And I think that
Yeah.
that's just an obvious reality to some extent. Like it is one of the things that I've been half joking about online, this is my last comment here, but only half joking, is that empathy has become a problem in our society. Like we've gotten to such a point of fake concern that people will really say stupid shit. Like we should shut down the entire country for 3 months to prevent whatever it turned out to be an 8% increase in the rate of death among people who are over 81. It's a terrible decision to have to make, but that's clearly the wrong direction to make it in. It's terrible that one kid would be bullied to the point of being peed on after a fight, something that happened in schools among boys. I mean, that's awful. But the question of whether you should remake the entire school into a psychologist practice everywhere in response to that, there has to be a point at which you answer no, where you say, like, I love people, but I'm not that caring. The purpose of the schools is to teach kids. The purpose of parents is that sort of moral education, that kind of stuff. Maybe fewer people need to be having kids if they can't do that at home. So
Let me just say one more thing because I will definitely get canceled in conservative areas. So I am definitely of the opinion that if these counselors are in school and if they are trying to indoctrinate our children, there shouldn't be any SEL, there shouldn't be any, transformative, justice or any of that stuff. But I think we run a risk if we say there's going to be absolutely no counselors in school.
Mhm.
I don't think we can go from there being too much to the number being zero. Because
Well,
what are you going to do with the rare amount of kids that, have autism and that may need some counseling services and maybe they can't get it at
Yeah.
home?
well, here's
no,
one.
that's really well argued. But I mean, I guess the question would be just like when I was a kid, I went to school. I went to kind of a typical mediocre school. I still love the school. I do some stuff for it, but it's East Aurora Senior, right outside Chicago. Like average test scores, mostly Latino and Black, but functional. And I mean, in the whole school, we had one quote unquote school shrink, one school nurse, and that was it. And I think that that's what most schools managed to do
Mhm.
between what, like 1975 and
Mhm.
Right.
2005. I mean, prior to the social media era. And I didn't notice that that was a problem. Like, there just aren't that many actually crazy people. So you
True.
actually run into a problem with kind of work generation. Like, if you have 7 school psychiatrists, which is what the school down the block from EAHS, what Waubonsie Valley Well Off School has now, what are they going to do? Is it possible they're going to start doing seminars on the complexities of gender identity and so on,
Well,
just
they
so people
already
don't think they're, yeah, but no, I mean, that's what I'm
they
saying.
Mhm.
Like,
did.
if you
Gross.
have a hate crime coordinator on your campus, you're going to get some hate crimes. Like, what else are you paying this guy six figures for?
Well,
Well,
I
I
think we're
think you're
forgetting one thing though, and that is, and Chrissy, I understand your concern, but it'd be interesting to add Buck, because I'm usually one of the older people on the show, and Lisa and I are
Yeah.
around the same age. So,
Yeah.
because when I went to school, we didn't have counselors in the school because
Yeah.
I'm old school. That was a more recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing I would say though is that we're forgetting one thing though, Christy. I get your not wanting to go to zero, but most, I mean, government is worse, but most entities can't do everything well,
That's
right?
right.
So if you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing well. So that's why the school who's tasked to educate can't educate. And I bet, oh, by the way, most of the clothes aren't clean, the food is disgusting, and the
Mhm.
psychologists aren't that good because you're trying to do everything. You simply can't do it.
Well, when I was going to school, we actually did have one, like you said, we had one counselor. I'm 62 years old, by the way. So I went in the 70s. Let's check what middle school. Are we talking middle school right now?
Right, right.
That we're talking. So in middle school, we did have one counselor, one nurse, right? Which I actually saw, but in middle school, I did see the counselor because I was acting out a little bit and I was kind of having problems with my academics. And then that counselor talked to my parents about getting me help. So the school system didn't pay for my therapy, and I didn't get therapy in school. I just got to see a counselor who said, okay, well, let me talk to your parents about what, because I was fighting. I was physically fighting. And that wasn't normal for a girl, right? To be
A
beating the
girl,
shit out of the guys.
who?
Yeah.
You're
A
fighting
girl.
boys?
I was fighting boys.
Hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, there's a whole other thing there. But, so I think I do agree that you need to have maybe, and also, wow, we're talking about 2025. We got kids on the internet This is such a huge
Yeah.
problem, man. And I do think a lot of the kids are struggling because of the internet. I think if somehow we could unplug kids, I think we would have a different situation going. I do believe a lot of this trans nonsense, gender ideology nonsense is literally coming from the internet. And I do also, it is not okay. Okay. It is not okay for any counselor, any school, or anybody to promote anything that has to do with gender at all. I'm a full on disagreement of that because they're teaching these kids. They are actually teaching them to trans is not an identity. I need everybody to understand that. I see what these kids are saying. I'm trans. What do you mean you're trans? Trans is a mental disorder. So they're teaching these children, and on some level, that's spinning them out, and it's giving them even more problems that they might not even have if they weren't attached to this trans thing.
Yeah, I mean that leads to what I think is probably the biggest problem. Obviously, what we're doing to kids, what kids are dealing with today is completely insane from social media and everything else is a
Yes.
problem. And, a lack of real adults in the room. And that's what I think is the biggest problem in that we talked a bit about what it does to someone who's dealing with this,
Yeah.
to have people affirm it and things of that nature. But it's no different than any other problem, like when you have activists. There's always been
Yeah.
activists, terrorists, extremists, people who thought, all these different things. But never until today really did the majority of people just decide to, as Lisa said, affirm it, right?
Mhm.
So to say that, it's a good thing, whatever this odd action, belief, thought, or whatever is. And so we're going to lean into it. So now you have government officials, celebrities, politicians, all these people saying that all these things that most people understand to not be good for society or normal, to
Yep.
say,
Yep.
oh, that's normal, right? And if you go against them, then you're a bad person.
Yep.
So that, I mean, even I don't, I've been talking about this for like a couple of years, and every time I mention it, people like they don't even realize it. But I'm sure Buck and Lisa will remember this. But twice well, not, I guess it would be 3 and 4 Congresses ago, the Democrats voted virtually, I think, unanimously both times to pass the Equality Act,
Mhm.
right? And so, for those of you who don't know, if you watch this show, you do because I mention it every few months. The Equality Act was an act in Congress to pass a law to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include gender ideology and gender expression. So, to Buck's point, that means what Buck is saying about trans goes out the window. That means if today, in the middle of this show, I decide that, you know what, I'm a woman, the law would say I am now a woman and I have every female protection. And they wanted to codify that in a law, right?
Right.
Most people didn't know it. I implore you every time I bring it up to go look it up, because what you'll find that will shock you is not that these people were crazy enough to try to pass a law, because there's crazy people in Congress. It's that it got over 200 votes. But for the evil racist Republicans, it would be law because every Democrat voted for it. And if you're a black person and you're pro-black, which officially are always talking about civil rights and you want, to equality for blacks and the blacks are being treated poorly and you want that equality that never came, how do you think your equality would work when now the white male cisgendered CEO of a Fortune 500 company can tomorrow say he's a woman and now he's, oppressed and he's a protected class? Yet every one of your black Democrat Congress people voted for him. All of them. The current mayor of LA, Sheila Jackson Lee, everybody.
Yeah.
Al Green, who I think is trying to impeach Trump again. The guy who's the guy that said that Guam was going to tip over? The crazy guy in Georgia.
I forget.
All of them. All of them voted for it, and no
Crazy.
one said a peep. So my question to the group is, if the people who are supposed to be in charge, the academics, the people who run universities, the thinkers, intelligentsia, if everyone who we're supposed to look to for leadership and logic is just buying into whatever the newest fad is, how can any kid or anybody else who's suffering know which way to go because they're telling them it's okay. I mean, the guy, Lisa, I think you watched the last school board meeting, and I got so upset because our superintendent comes to every meeting. He presents to every meeting. DOE employee. He's the superintendent of our district. And for the last 3 months, before he did his presentation, he started by saying, first, I want to thank you all for coming out here and speaking up. And let me tell you all the things that we do for trans kids. I'm like, these people they don't even have kids in your district, dude.
Yeah. And you know, I've known him personally for years. Used to watch the Super Bowl at his house sometimes. And when I mentioned the fallout, you know, what I'm talking about is the institutionalization of gender identity. And it's good the Equality Act didn't pass, but we essentially passed it in New York State.
Right,
and what we're seeing right now is, you know, Trump saying you have to go by biological sex and you can't teach about gender identity, and the state saying you are not allowed to discriminate based on gender identity and you must teach about it. And it just so happens that this week was Gender Identity Week in the middle school. So I looked at the curriculum and I really wanted to be you know, calm, cool, and collected. And I just like it was just sad.
Yeah.
Now I'm just sad. I'm sad about the state of things because I did feel like we were getting somewhere a little bit because, you know, people in my liberal bubble believe that gender identity is a real thing. and they have no memory of, you know, I'm a Gen Xer. They've forgotten that there was no such thing as a trans kid when we were growing up, and there were no piles of bodies before this medication made its way to our shores, right? They are just living in an ahistorical world in which this thing called gender identity has always existed. And that's the thing that's going to be so hard for us to grapple with because it is just a kind of spiritual, fantastical belief and not a reality, but it is presented to children as reality. The curriculum I looked at, it says, you know, gender identity and sexuality, myths and facts, and, you know, everyone has a gender identity is a fact. And you can choose your gender identity is a myth. It's all totally backwards. And you know, it's the other thing that's sad is you know, there are a lot of places where I'm welcome to share my work and research. But the New York City public school system is not one of them. And like a lot of my texts in liberal land, but I'm just doing it anyway. And I'm doing it in part because I feel a desperate need to, but also every once in a while, you know, yesterday somebody called me from a friend group that I don't see much anymore and said, I'm totally with you. I've kind of woken up. Thanks for speaking up. But, you know, helping people see that they don't have to go along with it. You can say no, except legally you can't. So we're in a real bind, and I don't know how to untangle what Trump is doing from what the blue states have already done and try to explain to the people who were, when Trump got elected, veering toward a little bit of introspection. Oh, maybe we went too hard on identity politics. Now it just looks like cruelty to them. And any understanding that they were developing has kind of shut down. And it's back to all victimhood with no understanding of how our actions and when I say our, I'm talking about the liberal world I come from. Yeah. We opened the Pandora's box, that our overreach is what led to this harsh backlash.
They will never admit it.
Yeah.
The trans terrorists will never admit it. The doctors, the surgeons who I am after, and I refuse to let go of this. You know, I am in a good space. I'm an elder of this so-called trans space. It's why they try, like you said, shut me up. You can't shut me up. It's not possible to shut me up. That's why anytime you guys need me to come to any school board meeting, I will come there and I will rip those people apart because they don't understand. Not only physically are you destroying these children's bodies, but mentally you are destroying these. This is not an easy thing to do. It makes me so mad, you guys. As you see, I get so passionate because I can't stand that they're doing this to children. There is a bigger plan here. It's not just about being trans. There is something evil attached to this. I'm telling you, you would not do this to all these children and teach children some irresponsible way of living and being without something, I don't know, just something to, I don't understand why we would think we could teach this in a school system. It just blows my mind.
I would pay money for that. Full disclosure, there are two people who are the activists who are leading all this nonsense and this activism against our board. And one of them is Chase Strangio, who is
I give me
who
him.
is the
Just give me him
attorney.
for an hour. Not even an hour. Give me him for 10 minutes.
So
10 minutes.
Chase is
I'll
coming
have
to
that guy change right back into a little lady that he is. I'll make that bitch cry like he won't even believe. Go get your tampons, little one. I'm telling you,
Okay,
I
maybe
can't.
that's why, Buck. Because
Yep.
my point, as I reached out to Buck, Buck was like, "I'm game." I said, "Chase, you come down here, you yell at me all the time. You say you want to talk. Let's come on and let's have a conversation." Didn't even
Nope.
reply,
No. He will
right?
never debate me
Right.
ever. And I'm saying he to be respectful. As you see, I went off on them. I can't stand. He is part of the problem. He is such a wingnut little. He's after those kids.
Yeah. For those
They're
who don't know, he um he testified in front of the. Well, I guess he
yeah,
had a lawsuit against the state of Tennessee, was it? And he was
yeah.
the head lawyer. Now, see, now you got me saying he, but the lawyer who was defending who was challenging Tennessee's
Yep.
um, gender affirming care for minors, and Tennessee had cut it off, saying that even if, let's say, you're 9 years old and you wanted to have puberty blockers, eventually get a surgery, and your parents are okay with it, the
Oh my
state was
God.
still saying no because you're 9 and you can't, consent to it. So it went to the Supreme Court, and Chase is the person that was, on that side, arguing the case from
Yep.
the Supreme Court, and happened to also be the person who was drumming up all the activists to come to our school
Of
board.
course.
And so I just said, Chase, why don't you come on and have a conversation?
Never.
And I got nothing. And Elena Daniels, who's another person, and both of them, neither one of them agreed to come on. So at the meetings, they're yelling at us and they're saying this. I'm like, well, I'm willing to have a conversation with you anytime. Okay, let's have a conversation. And it doesn't happen. But
Crickets.
yeah, I'm not surprised by that. But I can see
Yep.
Buck's probably scaring them. But to be fair,
Oh,
they didn't even
I'll
know.
even wear a suit. I'm not.
Ooh, look at that. But the other thing too, you talk about Trump. We got to spend the next few minutes talking about that because
Yeah.
Christie's concern, maybe not with Trump, but the concern for the psychologists in school kind of ties to this. And Lisa mentioned some of her friends that were slowly starting to see the light, and now they kind of recoiled because of Trump. So obviously, there is going to be some unintended consequences, some collateral damage, some things going on. And so we got to see where that goes. But we have to talk a bit about that. I know for those of you not in New York, so Trump's, not the recent one with the girls in sports, but the previous executive order about funding if you do this gender care to young kids. The major hospital systems in New York cancel all their appointments. Like literally, you could have had an appointment next Tuesday and it was like done. So for the last week and a half, they've been in the streets like protesting. Now the kids, all this kind of stuff. So that's been going on, right? And then now obviously you have the sports, and then the NCAA. I would love to hear your thoughts on the NCAA's response too, because while it was good, I kind of agree with the people that just that read it as it's proven that you have no spine because you wanted to do it. You just needed somebody else to take all the
That's right.
arrows for you. But Chrissy, I would ask you as the lawyer here that one, do you have a concern that some of this will go too far as a the reaction to what's been going on? And two, do you think that all of it will hold up? Because I know Lisa's concern is going to be the executive orders can only go so far because, they're going to try to do things just like with the DEI thing, where you had the DEI lady who was the chief DEI coordinator. And then when they said no DEI, they changed their title to just senior executive. You're going to have that, right? They're going to find creative ways to kind of
Yeah.
obfuscate, right? So what do you
Yeah.
think about that, Christy? Do you think that it will be a net good? I mean, I think it's good that it's shocking people. It's like dunking their head in a bucket of ice. But what do you think is going to happen, 3, 4 months down the road?
There's definitely going to be a slew of of lawsuits challenging this. Now, the good thing is, I know Arizona currently has a case, I think joined with a couple of other states, either headed to the Supreme Court or already in the Supreme Court. So there has to be current either Supreme Court cases or legislation that people are writing because we can't just live on executive orders because then, as soon as the administration switches over, they're just going to bring it all right back.
Right.
So that is happening along with Trump stopping everything immediately. And then the states and their resistance and these governors that are, determining. But I think that the team that Trump is putting in place, I don't think they're not playing games, right? So I think we're going to start seeing attorney generals of states,
Right.
getting subpoenas like, what are you doing? Why aren't you enforcing these? So
Right.
at first, I was like, when Trump first got elected, I was like, there's no way that he's going to fundamentally change everything. I mean, and I'm a diehard conservative and I love Trump. And I was like, yeah, there's no way that our government as we know it is going to change. And now I'm like, oh shit, like I can't even keep up, right?
Right.
Like he's really doing it. But
He is.
we are going to have to live through the lawsuits that are coming. They're already coming. They're already, upending his program, for the citizenship. So we're going to see that as well with these cases getting challenged.
Will,
Um,
oh, I'm
Sure.
sorry, were you done?
but no, I was going to say the good thing is look at the Supreme Court, and as long as, Amy Coney Barrett and, does the right thing over there, Amy, I think that, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Will, what do you think about that? She made a point about the Democrat blue states pushing back, which that's what they got to do. But I've been watching a little bit on TV, and they've been looking like pretty crazy. Don't you? What do you think that's going to do to them? I mean, because everybody's thinking that Trump is like the bull in a china shop, and therefore, is people going to recoil, and some will. But don't you think that the Brandon Johnsons and the Cory Bookers yelling on TV, regular people going to look at that was like, is he really yelling because the president, I don't like the guy, but because he said you can't give a shot to an 8-year-old? Is that what he's really yelling about? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that's going to help their cases long term?
I mean, I think after they tried to kill him, Trump is fully, and they broadly, but Trump is fully capable of throwing Brandon Johnson in jail. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I think that most people have really had enough of this stupid bullshit, like these low IQ leaders of major metropoles that can't stop people from shitting on the streets, going out and giving these frantic speeches about how some women have 9-inch penises. I think that a lot of people are just sick of it. I'm one of them. I'm not an especially patient person, but I mean, I do my morning meditation. Like, I didn't expect Trump to do all this either. But like, if you're looking at it from a strategic standpoint, federal law is superior in practice to state law. This is known as the Supremacy Clause. This exists at the level of the Constitution. What we've seen recently is kind of weak leadership from rhino Republicans and from guys like Biden, where people were just willing to let you be a sanctuary state for 15 years and say crap like, hey, weed and amphetamines are legal here. And it's really kind of crazy when you think about that. Like, you just have the option of not doing that if you're the president.
Right.
And I think because it would be such a clash, I mean, like governors threatened to send out the National Guard, 10 or 12 could die. I mean, no one has done that. But I mean, when you look at some of these people Trump has, a Kash Patel, Chris Rufo, Bondi, Tardy Bondi, Christina Pashaw, I think they're fully capable, especially interestingly enough, the two women on that list, of saying, enough of this crap, like you will obey the law or go to prison. And the federal government has the power to do that. It's worth noting that like raw power has a value with all this moral discussion aside. Like when you ask, can the president do that? I mean, yeah, the president can write an executive order that commands at very least the entire executive branch. And in practice, the country. Like the way affirmative action began is that Lyndon Baines Johnson signed EO 11456. One of you might correct the numbering there. But every company that did business with the federal government had to pursue proportional representation, not just of men and women and things like sales roles, which I might even agree with, but of like every race. And there are like 17 listed. It gets kind of ridiculous. And what that means is that because you want the feds as a client, every company in the country then started doing this. When Trump came in, he by EO revoked 11456. So you have that power. And then the next level is, well, won't the courts challenge you? Well, yeah, but because humans are corrupt, predatory monkeys, it's probably pretty relevant that 6 of your personal friends are on the Supreme Court. Like Trump's friendly with Clarence Thomas. He appointed 3 of the justices. He stood by Kavanaugh through all those insane allegations. I mean, his sexual assault very serious, but like people were saying Kavanaugh was running sex parties on boats. Have you seen this guy? He's like a girls' basketball coach. It was just obvious nonsense. 90% of the claims I would say were obvious lies. One is a bit troubling. But like all those people owe Trump favors. Coney Barrett wouldn't be on the Supreme Court without Trump. I think ACB, for example, who has 6 kids, is pretty aware of how babies are made and is going to be very supportive of the idea that there's such a thing as a woman. So yes, last thing, but you can come in as president and say, no, you can't muster troops on the border against me, Mr. Governor, and threaten to leave the country over this topic. If you do this, I'm just going to arrest you. And I think Trump, after getting his ear nicked, is probably at a level of irritation where he'll do that.
Charles, I had one more quick comment, one more along that. I also think that Trump is attacking on every level. It's like an ambush. It's so bad to where I eat, sleep, and drink politics, and I have turned the news off. Like I'm like, okay, just do what you're gonna do. I just can't keep up anymore.
Wake
So
me
I
up
think
in a
at
few
some
weeks.
point they're gonna be like, forget these kids, right? They're gonna be like, we have serious problems. Like every agency is being demolished. Like we're talking about acquiring, crazy stuff all over the world. They're not going to be worried about these trans kids because Trump is attacking on every level that this is going to be the least of their concerns.
And it's probably not a topic they can win on. So at some point they might believe it. Some of these people believe it, some don't. They're just doing it because they got them brownie points. So when they stop to get points, they stop doing it. So when it's not a winning argument, they kind of go away. Real quick, I want to ask you about it's interesting watching. I want to know what you think about it. I mean, I see some of your reactions watching you on social media. Because people use you, obviously some of the people didn't know you and they did it because it was funny. So I'm sure you all saw where the people would use Buck as an example against what Trump was doing. There's like, oh, so would you want this person to go to the women's prison? And Buck would be like, yes, because I'm a woman,
I want
to
go. First of all, that's hilarious. I don't think Buck would mind.
You thought it would be, right? So what do you think
like,
about that?
Are you kidding? I would take the woman's prison over the man's prison. I'm all for it. And hey, I don't mind using the women's room. I'm just not going to do it because it's not cool. And these people think they use me as that gotcha, right? Kind of thing. It's so gross, but I just want to say this real quick here. All these hospitals, and I think it's 5 so far, and that what's her name, Cynthia Nixon, was in front of what's that hospital there?
Langone, yeah.
Right. So they shut down. They shut it down, people. They shut down transing kids, right? So I want to say this. If these hospitals were really on the up and up, they wouldn't have shut that down. If they were actually thinking what they were doing was the right thing, they would have never shut it down. They know they did it because they were forced to do it. So think about that. So they shut it down because they know, this isn't real. And now we finally got the opening to shut it down. And that's, I think, is, to me, I'm most happiest is that these hospitals are stopping giving these children puberty blockers and surgeries. So it's to me, I'm happy.
It's possible that some of these places were looking for an off ramp and couldn't take it until they could blame it on Trump.
Yeah, that's what I think about.
When we bring up they, and they're going to forget and they're going to move on. I'm wondering who they are, because I really live surrounded by the people who believe in this completely. I am in like the bluest neighborhood in blue New York City, and people who have transitioned their children or who are concerned. Liberals are very, very concerned about being seen as good people. I don't know if they care about actually being good people, but they're concerned about being seen as good people. And I think they will do anything. I mean, I think to be seen that way. And I think over the past 10 years, what we've learned is that you could have this Ivy League educated, just utterly brilliant person, white liberal, and if you call them a racist, they will lie down in the street and say, do anything you want to me. Like, just don't call me a racist, And they still believe this is happening because of hatred and bigotry.
Yes.
And the problem is, when you read the articles in the New York Times or the LA Times or any liberal media about these hospitals being shut down, none of them bring up the Cass review. They don't bring up Sweden and Finland and
That's right.
All of the countries that have are attempting to do a U-turn, even if they haven't done one. They don't place it in the context of that Supreme Court case that Charles mentioned, that revealed through amicus briefs massive scandals and suppression of evidence by the WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Just insane scandals about the AAP and Rachel Levine, the former Assistant Secretary of Health, and pushing to remove age limits for surgeries and hormones. Crazy things happen, but they were barely reported in the media that everyone around me consumes. And so I am in this very uncomfortable position of knowing things that people everywhere around me, nobody knows. And they are told that facts are hateful. We got to this. It is an amazing that we are living in a time in which it is hate speech to say that biological sex is real. That is incredible. That is beyond Stasi,
It's
that
crazy.
So wild. And I just want to go around and poke people and say, people got kicked when they complain about Elon Musk and Twitter and it's all Nazis. And I say, but before Elon Musk, you would get kicked off for saying men can't be women.
Right.
And I don't know what to do. Back to the stopping versus ending. Other than what I've been doing, which is writing this stuff for liberals to send to each other and speaking up and just grooving on my pariah status, which is not really, that unusual for me. I have more of an excuse now, but I want those people who have let themselves be radicalized to the point where they think it's cruel to have an executive order that says we have to reestablish biological sex as reality. I want them to wake up.
No, they have to be deprogrammed. They've been programmed. It's like a cult. It really is like a cult. They actually have to. So I suggest to you to leave the Liberal Party, number one. Secondly, I'm going to tell you.
Independent.
Well, good, right on. So secondly, I'm going to say these people have been totally radicalized. That's why I call them it's a whole terrorist organization. So I think, and I know people aren't going to like this, but I like what Trump is doing. I'm sorry. I just like that he's just going in there and bashing it apart because it's been built on such false. And I'm talking the trans stuff, right? It really has been built on disingenuous, lying, scary stuff. So it has to be completely ripped down. And those people are going to cry, but they're not going to go away. Don't think they're going to go away. They might hide for a little while and then try to come back out again.
Yeah. Just one comment there. To a certain extent, well, first of all, I totally agree with Buck. I don't think that society can function around a small delusional number of people at the extremes of one of the parties. And I'm not talking about trans people here, really. I'm talking about leftists.
Yeah.
When you talk about people that are in Chicago, it's not quite as bad as New York, but it's 95% of the way there. When you talk about these people that would be on the north side of the city discussing Donald Trump, they still believe he's a Russian agent. It's just it's a bubble full of complete lunacy. And if you go to Brooklyn, and you'd find the same thing in any large metro area. And I think that that has to be treated the same way that QAnon is treated, frankly. I mean, like Q turned out to be a well-known hacker who was just hoaxing boomers. And as a
Wow.
political independent myself, like I read some of those messages, like it looks like Shifty Red Fox is about to play. It's like, get the fuck out. Like, this is obviously internet bullshit. I feel bad for these old people that believe this. It's the same thing with this stuff.
Yeah.
I do think that most people, leftists in particular, even more than QAnon types, even more than alt-righters, do seem to have a memory that can vanish. So when you say like no one, it's like Brave New World, where they talk about how people that truly believe in the party, that lean to the left, start every thought process at year zero. It really is like that. Like when I talk about COVID, people say things like we didn't lock down. And like, I mean, I lived pretty near downtown Louisville at the time. Like, yeah, you did. Like, banks had 10-pound padlocks on their doors. Like, what are you talking about? Like, New York and Chicago is way more intense. Kids were eating outside for 2 years. But it's just like, well, no one supported that. No one wanted to defund the police. That's what we're gonna see with this as well.
Right.
I do think that, and it's good someone's throwing the punches that'll make that happen. I do think the one group of people that will fall down last, that might fight to the bitter end, that might move, are going to be the people that did mutilate their kids.
Yeah.
Like not allow like some level of transition at 26, but like I legitimately cut my teenage daughter's breasts off because her boyfriend that I allowed to have sex with her at 14, I'm actually thinking of a case here where there's a lawsuit pending, suggested to her that she wasn't really a girl. Like
Oh
that
my God.
mom, the person responsible for that decision has got to either believe that their daughter is a non-binary, sapphire child or whatever the term is, and all their decisions were good, or they would have to think like I horribly abused this little kid. Like none of this should have been allowed. She should have been riding horses. And I think a lot of people are not going to be able to come to that decision. But that's going to be a tiny fringe. Like there aren't, well, in the cruelest sense, there aren't that many trans kids.
Yeah, the
Like
last
that
thing I
have
want
gone
to
through anything more than social transition.
Mhm.
Yep. And the last thing I want to say is that you're right about that. But in addition to not being able to remember anything and start back at year zero, they also find a way to explain away anything when they're backed into a corner where they can't say what you're arguing is not true and not bad. They'll say, yeah, but you see this a lot with the with this all the Doge stuff in the USAID. And they're like, well, they spent $20 million for a picture. What was it? $10 million they gave Ben Stiller to take a picture. Well, $10 million is small compared to the defense budget.
My God.
But
Yeah.
so are you admitting then that it's
Yeah.
to give somebody $10 million for a photo? No, I'm just saying it's far less than the defense budget. So why are you complaining? Right. So that's what they're doing. Well, what about the people who are detransitioners? Like Buck will tell you, they just erased the detransitioners.
That's
Like
right.
someone, I didn't go to the meeting, so I don't know who, but there was a trans person who came to one of March's meetings last month. And at the meeting that I was at, which was after that one, they were saying, and then last month you had some self-hating trans person there. So now
that was the
self-hating.
meeting with me and Ben Appel and Corey Cohn.
Oh, that's who it was. Okay.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
all spoke.
Yeah. So
You guys
because
did a
Nobody
great
came.
job. You
Yeah,
did
so
an awesome job, Lisa.
but that's the
Yeah.
thing they're saying, because that person does, because Buck doesn't agree with us, Buck is a self-hating.
Self-hating.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what they'll do. They just say, well, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. Well, I guess if my
They do that with
alternative is-
every group of people. If you're Asian and
Yeah.
you're black and you don't go along with the thing, I mean, they just call you self-hating, and
You know you're racist if you
Yeah.
deny you're racist, to quote Robin DiAngelo. Like the biggest sign
Totally.
of white privilege is saying, well, I come from a poor white neighborhood and my boyfriend's black and I am not racist. Well, that's what a racist would say. And it's like, well, no.
a racist would say that though, Will. Come on, a racist would say
A racist would say, I come from West Virginia, my boyfriend's black. I mean, like, I think racism, I'm pretty sure all you guys agree, but like, words do have to have real definitions. Like, trans
sure.
means you have gender dysphoria. Racism, like, if you regularly sleep with someone of a different race, like, unless you're Thomas Jefferson, unless there's some weird power dynamic shit going on, but like, you're not racist. Like, if all your friends are black, that's actually a really good argument. You don't dislike black people.
Totally.
Like you chose to play varsity basketball and hang out 3 hours a day with all of these black dudes. You probably like black people, all right. If you like yachting, you're probably not racist against Caucasians. I mean, there's an element of common sense here that the left
my
consciously
goodness.
rejects.
It's like yachting.
You like
Hilarious.
yachting.
What if you identify as Thomas Jefferson? That's
You probably got some really weird behaviors and fantasies in modern terms, but as long as
Totally.
as long as you keep that to yourself, I'm fine with it. But you're, I don't know, he's an exception. The Thomas Jefferson identification, you could still be a racist.
Last words to Buck and to our guests, Buck and Lisa. What would you like to say in closing?
Go on, Lisa. Okay, I'll say something.
Look,
Yeah,
I was
you
trying to say
say
ladies first, but I could be a lady right now.
Then you go.
No, first off, you guys are awesome. I had an awesome time. Thank you so much. To the people out there, I just want to let you know that a lot of this stuff is rhetoric. Please just do a little more research. If you need to see other sides of the trans space, you can check me out anywhere. I'm also really good at responding to emails or DMs or any of that. And, really just the only thing I care about is the kids. Adults can cut their arms and legs off and be beach balls. I don't really care, but we
But wait a
really
minute,
gotta.
we don't allow people to cut their arms and legs off. I just
You're
thought
right.
about that.
Actually,
I'm
it's
sorry, go ahead.
illegal. You're right. It's actually
Well,
illegal.
it's body
Is it
modification
illegal?
surgery varies state by state. Like just not to be that obnoxious lawyer
But
guy.
if it
Like
was
if you look at
considered gender surgery and that you wanted to be identify as a beach ball, you could literally do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
well,
it's so messed up, the whole thing.
it would have
But
to be linked to some medical condition, but I mean, I know I've looked into like the Tiger Man and Demon Man
no, you're
cases, like those
right.
people you see on the
You're
internet
right.
and in the club scene.
You're
And yeah,
right.
like you can make yourself look like a demon if a
But
doctor
that's
is
a
willing to say,
disorder.
Yeah, but they
That's an
probably
actual
push back a
disorder.
lot more for that than they would if you just
They
said, I want to be
do.
a man.
They do. They do. They totally do. But
And you're
know
probably
that
not 9.
And they
know
don't
that
say it's
biology
life-saving and
matters.
evidence-based. They just say, I'll
Yeah,
take your money if that's what you
that's
want.
right.
Yeah.
And you're an
Right.
adult.
And you're an
you're an
adult,
adult.
right?
You just
Yeah.
have to
So,
jump through enough hoops so you don't come back and sue them later.
yep, that's right.
Right.
evidence-based species transition therapy. Yeah, I mean,
So reach out to Buck if you want
level,
the
it's
truth.
more
And Lisa,
plausible that as like a human fighting man, you could be an ape or a demon than that you could be a woman. I mean, in like every sense, like if you have
Really?
a womb transplant, yeah, I think that's
Boy.
please,
Yeah.
I'm
Lisa,
scared
take
of
us
the
home.
womb
Charles,
transplant.
before Lisa, I just wanted to say
Okay.
one thing.
not
So
gender
I
correct.
think
Shut
I
up, Lisa.
do.
Christy wants to talk. I'm
I
sorry.
think I do have a ray of hope. I don't live in New York, thank God, but I do
That's why.
and I don't have very many liberal friends that still like
Well,
me.
that's
But
why.
I do I do have hope that Jillian Michaels woke up, right? She just woke up and was like,
Right.
enough is enough. These people are crazy. So I have not given up all hope that liberals will not come to their senses,
Yeah.
at least where the kids are involved.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. It's possible.
Well,
I
wait,
think
forgive
if there
me.
are any
Normally, I would
liberals,
agree with her, Lisa. I'm sorry. Now I'm interrupting. I just got
oh
to
my
say,
God.
normally I would agree with you, but Lisa can testify to the fact that I've been yelled at for 12 months, so I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh,
I've been
Well,
told that I'm literally killing kids, so I believe
Yeah.
in what I see it. Go ahead, Lisa.
yeah.
I want to end with something that happened at the meeting. So Corey Cohn and Ben Appel and I spoke at the committee meeting. We couldn't speak at the actual district meeting that Charles is always at.
Right.
But we spoke to a small group, and no one in the DOE, the school my kids go to, no one would send out any information about this meeting. So it was poorly attended, but I think that was a great thing. And the trans activists came, and at one point when they didn't like what we said, they tried to get everyone to put their heads down or protest in various ways. We handled it well. And at the end, this young trans identified female came up to me and said, I've been working with my therapist on expressing my feelings, so I want you to know that you hurt my feelings. Oh, because I had taken a picture when the person put his head down and said, everybody put, and he said that hurt his feelings, and also that I had tweeted information about their meeting to organize their protests in which they sing and do the Macarena and disrupt and it hurt this person's feelings that I had shared that, which had the address of their public meeting. And I said, I just couldn't believe it, like that the therapist was telling this young person that she, whatever, I'm sorry, I can't figure it out anymore, should
who cares?
that a stranger would care about that, and that his or her pain mattered more than or justified months and months of harassment.
Yeah.
And there is a study that someone just sent me that showed that trans-identified people are much more likely, Buck aside, to be bullies. And
tough shit, isn't it? Hey,
yeah,
life sucks. So,
so,
everyone gets bullied on some
you
level.
know,
So like, Jesus, man, these people.
what I want to say is just everybody in liberal land, just wake the fuck up now.
Yeah.
Enough. We have to stop defending this. I can't.
Actually, you're doing
anymore.
children a disservice when you just like, okay, bully happens. And, you know, like there's a difference between like getting your head smashed into the toilet and pissed on. But like, you know, people bully. That's just part of life. And it's not relegated to trans kids. And these feelings are, you know, next time tell those kids to just F off. Like, I'm sorry, your feelings don't matter.
Well, I'm going to let everybody go, but I want to say two quick things to put a finer point on it, because maybe someone listening who agrees with us but been quiet will understand why it's important for people to speak up against this. And they're both kind of about the meetings, in that the meeting that Lisa's talking about, I want people to know that they tried to shut it down. It went to legal. We got many emails trying to stop the meeting beforehand, saying it was an illegal meeting because it was going to hurt people and it was going to violate the state's civil rights laws because it's hurtful and it's not, you know, it's anti-trans. So they wanted to stop the meeting. And then to your thing about the picture. So our meeting, just to talk about, you know, both how sensitive, but also how, you know, narcissistic people are. Our meeting is a posted public forum that is recorded every month, right? And we have some whack job leftist on the council who screamed at another council member because they took a picture of a sign or something and say, you can't take a picture of these people, you're violating their privacy. Well, they volunteered to sign up to come into a public meeting that's being recorded and posted on the internet. So, but they're trying to argue that someone taking a picture was bullying, but they're on video. What are you talking about? And so they tried to pass a resolution for us to vote, saying that no one can take a picture. To which we laughed.
Isn't it a public meeting?
And it's recorded.
What are they talking? They're so crazy. They're actually crazy.
This is the types of things that we're doing instead of talking about education, like arguing the word freshman. But that's why the kids can't read, Lisa. We'll have to leave it there. I hope you all come back and talk about whatever next thing happens in this this fight against this. But Buck Angel, Lisa Selin Davis, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to save. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save because I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.